taking a step back, Jack, to my two of my idols, McEnroe and Wielander. I talked to my tennis coach here. I'm in Playa del Carmen, Mexico right now, um, working on another book and doing some research and doing all of my fitness and tennis. And he said that McEnroe's kinetic chain, in his opinion, is superb. And my guess is that he was born with really balanced hips and shoulders. And, in his book, he talks about the fact that he has a really small upper body and a pretty strong lower body. He had more tissue when he was, 19 than he does now on his legs. But he thought, a pretty good build for the sport of tennis. You don't see guys built like the NBA players that have these really wide wingspans and huge shoulders, trying to turn into the ball and get that rotational force. Yeah, I would imagine that for Becker, that's the part of his game that could break down, getting his hips and his shoulders back through at the right time, because he was such a big hombre. I think he was, 195 and a fit 195, which meant if he went out for an American football team, they could probably built him up to 230. So, and then if you could tell me what you think about the kinetic chain on McEnroe, and then the footwork, which I think is phenomenal on Wielander. He when I watch his games in the 1980s, he seems like he gets his body out of the way as well as anybody on the tour, and he gets through the ball like a Connors would get through the ball. So maybe if you could share your thoughts on those two retro awesome players.
Well, it's funny. Those are two words I stay away from because they're the new buzzwords. The new buzzwords, right? I mean, the old buzzwords were racket back, follow through. New buzzwords are footwork, kinetic chain, and racket head speed. Those are the new buzzwords. I mean, you tell that to a non-athlete, it's going to help them as much as follow through. It's not going to help them at all. That's the problem. The kinetic chain, I mean, I understand what it is. I have a friend, Alex Heavey, out of Argentina. He's a very good coach. He's worked with some of the best players from Argentina and in the world. And he's written books on the kinetic chain. And I've, done forwards, and we have nice conversations. And he understands what I'm saying. Sure, there is a kinetic chain, but I think the game is still seen a little wrong. I mean, it's not footwork. It's movement. It's the way you move on the court. I was taught to take little steps and stutter steps and split step. And yes, all that stuff is important. Probably the latter, the most important, the split step. But I think the stutter steps actually hurt me. When you watch Federer now, he doesn't take those stutter steps. He moves beautifully, but he takes long steps. He does crossover steps. He steps behind himself a lot. He does some really neat things. And I'm like, and I was always, I followed my coaches to the T. When they said stutter step and move in place, I did. And so the kinetic chain, my issue, I guess, there is you're only talking about what happens from the hips to the hand, to the racket. Well, there's much more to it. I mean, what happens on the drawback? That was one thing about McEnroe. He did what I call core fundamental one very well, the 45-degree angle. That guy, he freaking lived at the 45-degree angle, and he had no stroke. He would be small at the 45 and then big at the 45. And that was it. Kind of like, believe it or not, very much like Nadal. The only difference is Nadal has a little bit more core and he uses it well, and he's got a strong core. So he had a bigger hit. McEnroe didn't have a big hit. I've hit next to him a million times in New York, and I hit the ball as big as he does, and I ain't McEnroe. So he never had a big hit. He had an unusual serve that really threw people off. Great hands at net, great volleys, but he was never known for his ground strokes, and he certainly wasn't known for his beautiful ground strokes. No one ever said, "Oh, McEnroe is such a pretty player." That never came up. Kind of like Serena. No one's ever said, "Oh, look how effortless Serena is." So I guess I like to look at different players personally as my poster boys and girls, to use, because when you watch a Federer, his drawback, the way he goes into the stroke, is just as important as his delivery, where McEnroe was more like a Connors. It was very mechanical, and it was a different game back then. Once again, like you said, Sifu, it was about getting to net, and that ain't the case anymore.
Yeah.